All right, hello, everyone. Welcome to this special meeting of the City of Binghamton Planning Commission. My name is Nick Corcoran. I'm currently the chairman of this commission, which is comprised of local community members tasked with reviewing site plans and special use permits for consistency with the standards and criteria set forth in the City of Binghamton Code. Based on our total number of planning commission members, 4 members must be present to constitute a quorum. Tonight we have 5 members, which means we do have a quorum and can proceed. To verify that, let's do roll call. Mario DeFulvio. Joe D'Angelo is absent. Chris Judgeets.
Here I am, Rocky like a hurricane.
Thank you. Kelly Weiss.
Present.
Manny Priest.
Here.
And Steve C. Prasad is absent. All right, that means we do have a quorum and can proceed. All right, there's only one item on our agenda tonight. So this is public hearings and final deliberations for the applicant Addiction Center of Broome County. Project address is 15 Charles Street. This is a site plan review and special use permit to convert the basement of an existing mixed use building to social services use / warming station in the I-2 light and medium industrial district. Just a reminder, anybody that's speaking tonight, please speak directly into the microphone because they're pretty finicky. And if you can make sure the green light is on when you start. All right, so welcome back.
Hi, everyone. Thank you. Sarah Campbell with Hinman, Howard & Cattell representing the applicant. Just briefly want to thank you for your careful consideration of this project. I know it's not been easy and it is a complicated process. We hope that we've provided you sufficient information to evaluate the special permit use. I just wanted to quickly go over just 2 things, just to sort of remind us all what a special permit use is. So there's uses that are permitted by right, which essentially means they're just subject to site plan review, and uses that are subject to special permit. So those special permit uses are set forth in your zoning regulations by the elected officials. They've decided that this is a use that could be permitted in the district. And for this project, that would be a social service use. So the inclusion of a permitted use in the ordinance as a special permit is tantamount to a legislative finding that the permitted use is in harmony with the general zoning plan and will not adversely affect the neighborhood. Again, the decision to grant or deny a special permit has to be based on the record before you and cannot be based solely on generalized community opposition. The legislative authority has already found these uses are permitted. And just so you know, the social service definition within your code lists some subcategories. So social services are defined as organizations that provide support services for specific populations or the community at large. Also includes facilities that provide transient housing relating to social service programs, which include alcohol or drug rehabilitation facilities, which would be in-house residential treatment, community residential facilities with counseling, meals, and other services. Human service agencies would be assistance with people obtaining services, counseling, therapy, self-help, and also a methadone facility is also included in that definition. So, we'd submit to you that this proposal is squarely within the legislative contemplation of uses that are appropriate in this location. I think that's further supported by, the colored diagram that I showed you before, with our property being here in the brown, Clinton Street going all the way here, and all of the red, which is also neighborhood commercial, which also allows social services as a special permit use. So it isn't as if this particular location has just been carved out as a single appropriate location for social services use. City Council has found that all of the properties fronting Clinton Street would be equally appropriate. That's sort of borne out by mental health facility that is now vacant, but was located right across the street from the Boys and Girls Club and was constructed for that purpose. So those uses are not new. With that, we're really happy to answer any questions that you have. I think there's been some, you hear stuff on the street, right? Which is the street we all live in here. And I think there's, been some sort of unfounded concerns. Parking was a concern, and, we have a site plan. We have more than 400 parking spaces. So that's certainly not, our population doesn't, by the way, mostly drive. And then just to remind you that this is a 68,000 square foot building, of which 2,000 square feet is going to be devoted to code blue. So only when the temperature is 32 degrees or below, warming station. This is not even a 24-hour a day facility. It's not 12 months of the year. And then I'd also just ask you to remember that ACBC has a very long history of successful operation in Binghamton, probably mostly borne out by the fact that most of us don't even know that they exist in the community. And they also have a recent comfort station or comfort facility, which is not code blue, which is on Shenango Street that they run. So have a lot of real world experience associated with this kind of operation. And really, I can't think of anyone more qualified to supervise and run a program like this. And that's it. If you have questions, we're happy to answer them.
All right, thank you, Brian.
I just want to make one clarification. I don't normally disagree with Ms. Campbell, but my interpretation of an SPU is a little bit differently. I believe city council has said that the uses that are on that list may meet the criteria and may not be in conflict with the neighborhood. But there's a reason why they gave to 11 factors you're supposed to consider to determine whether it's an SPU. So if you determine that it meets those 11 factors, then it's an SPU and it does meet, as she said, but you got to go through the factors because otherwise there'd be no point of having the factors. There's 11 factors you're supposed to consider when granting an SPU.
All right.
Sorry, SUP.
Special use, what do we call it here?
Yeah, it's an SUP now.
Special use permit.
Special use permit. So.
All right. So I guess the first question is, so we've kind of, we closed the public hearing at the last meeting. After everybody who has been at that meeting and previous meetings were allowed to speak. So the first question, I didn't see a reason to reopen the public hearing. I think we've heard as many new facts as we were going to hear. I didn't think there were any new points that were going to be made by allowing anybody else to speak. But if anybody is interested in reopening the public hearing, they could make a motion to do that. If we do make that motion and it were to pass, we would have to basically end tonight's meeting because we would have to open the public hearing at the next meeting after we had time to advertise it. So I guess that's the first question. Is anybody interested in making a motion to reopen the public hearing?
I just want to note that I was not present for the last meeting, but thank you to the staff for all your hard work in providing the transcript and the video. So I am caught up and there was a lot of information, a lot to digest. Appreciate everyone who was involved, but I'm ready to move forward without opening the public hearing again.
Okay. Anybody else thinking about making a motion to reopen the public hearing? Are we okay to move forward? Okay, so we're okay to move forward without opening the public hearing. So I just want to clarify to everybody in the audience, if anybody was here to speak tonight. So the public hearing has been closed. So at this point, anybody here is just a audience member watching the proceedings. And it's not appropriate to enter into any kind of dialogue with the applicant or the planning commission. I just want to make sure that that's clear. All right. Does anybody have any questions, comments, concerns for the applicant that they want answered? All right. Well, I think we've all had a time between the last meeting and this time to go back over all of the meeting minutes and review the videos that were put together by Shailen. Thank you. So I'll,
Chairman, could I just make one comment,
Yeah.
just for the record? I just want to state that I am an employee of the Broome County Sheriff's Office, and I do acknowledge that Sheriff Akshar did submit a letter of support for this project. I didn't write it. I was not part of the drafting process, but I considered it equally alongside every other public comment that was submitted. Won't affect my opinion or decision, but I just wanted to get that on the record. I did speak with Corporation Counsel about it, and they said I would not have to recuse myself.
all right,
We advise that he should disclose that, but if he can make a decision independent of that, that he can do that.
Great.
You all know that I've not been here for these meetings. But I was consulted after, I think, the last meeting or perhaps the meeting before that. And it was in regards to litigation, potential for litigation. I guess what I always tell planning commissions and zoning boards is that decide every case as though you're going to be sued, because it's likely that you're either going to be sued by the person who you approve a project for and the neighbors will sue you, or you deny it and the neighbors and the applicant sues you and then the neighbors are happy. So the best way to protect yourself in any decision you make is to simply go through and put on the record exactly why you make each determination as to each factor of the test. So go through the 11 factors, state every piece of evidence you rely on, and make it a record so that supports it. The question the court will be asking itself if there is litigation is, did you make a rational decision? And a rational decision generally is one that's based upon substantial evidence and based upon facts in the record. If there was something said in the record that was a fact that you didn't find credible, state that you didn't find it credible and why you didn't find it credible. If it's something you did find credible, state that why you found it credible. And as you go through each of those 11 factors, make sure that you build that so that that's the record that protects you, regardless of who might sue you, or if that's the way you protect it's the way you protect your decisions.
all right. Brian, is it helpful tonight if, as we vote, everybody states why they are voting the way they are voting?
I would have a lengthy discussion before there was a motion going through the criteria and everybody state the criteria and then make a motion at the end of that.
Okay. All right. Item number 1.
Now, let me understand. Let me explain that a little further. It's 11 factors. They're considered as a balancing test, essentially. So you may find, yeah, that one's met, but no, these aren't. So somebody should keep notes and keep it sort of a scale of where you guys are so that, you know, if the scale weighs this way, why it tips that way or why it tips the other way. Okay.
All right. Well, let's start off by going through some of the lists here. I guess we're going to have a little discussion. I can try and take notes as we go.
I can take notes, Nick.
All right, or Tito's going to take notes. All right, so number 1 is the proposed design located and operated so as to protect the public health, safety, and welfare. So I'm just going to start off this one. So for almost all of these answers, or all of these questions, my answer is going to be about the same. This is a very small square footage in a much larger building. The number of people that they are talking about servicing is not consistent every day. It's only in times of emergency. And I do not see that as being affecting, for me, I can just say right now, I don't see it affecting any of these 11 criteria. But I guess that's a starting point to open up the discussion for number 1.
I guess I'll jump in. I have heavily weighed this, and it is the first 2 parts of the proposal. I don't have any issues with the rest, but number 1 and number 2, I keep coming back to the time, and I understand what you're saying, Nick, about how often and the frequency. But I keep coming back to people coming in with illegal drugs and knives, whatever they be, with some criminal backgrounds, and then being released in the morning while there are services there for the evening for them. They are at a disadvantage of being without drugs or alcohol, whatever it is, at some of these people. And handing them back and then sending them into the population for a little bit of time gives me a great amount of unease. And I do think that I mentioned before the concept of it being like musical chairs. And if this were an opportunity and there's going to be a 3-day cold spell, I know I wouldn't leave the area in hopes to get these amazing services you provide. And I think that would cause potential problems in the neighborhood and safety of the community, which address both 1 and 2. Those are the reasons I give pause to this project.
All right. Chris? Yeah.
Well, I'm not exactly familiar with the 11 points that Brian's referenced. Okay. Oh, see, I guess I'm working off of a 10-point standards of site plan review off of the 3. Okay.
So
So-
on that same staff report, it's site plan review criteria and then special use permit criteria follows.
Well, under number 1, I do have concerns about some of the public safety concern. Doubles up with some of the things that Kelly just mentioned. And also, at the last meeting, there was some extensive submissions on the record during the public hearing, including a lengthy academic journal article that discussed the relations between homeless shelters and criminal activity. And that was pretty powerful read.
Okay.
I'll say a lot of those concerns and that report, weighed heavily. It's not an easy decision. I did take some time to reach out to some members of law enforcement in other communities that recently opened similar warming stations. I asked them, did this have a positive or negative effect on the immediate surrounding community? And, they said there are a lot of good things about warming stations in general, but in that specific location, things did not necessarily improve. We got more calls, there was more activity. People did leave in the middle of the night, and that was in their experience. Not saying that this is across the board, but it is a valid concern.
All right. Same.
Concerns that everybody has mentioned. Number 1 and 2 are particularly concerning. But there are 11 items here. So if we take that, I guess I'm not sure how you weigh the 11, but
Okay. We can,
Some may not apply also. So like landscaping, for example, there's no site work proposed, so that doesn't apply. So you can state that too.
I guess since we're talking about it now, I didn't find the source of that article to be very credible. It seemed like somebody was searching pretty hard to find an article that was against what we're talking about today. Whereas what the applicants submitted was, the New York Times, NPR, just places you've heard of without having to look into where they were from. I'm just not familiar with that journal.
I would respectfully submit that given the editorial tone of those other 2 of NPR and New York Times, I'm not shocked or surprised that somebody could cherry pick articles in favor of homeless applications from those 2 sources.
Gotcha. Okay. Does anybody, just out of curiosity, is anybody familiar with what that source is, or I didn't look any further. I'm just not, anybody look to see what that source actually is? Is it a credible source or is it just academic journal? Yeah. Okay. I'm just curious then. All right. All right, so that was number 1, and kind of touched into number 2. Will the proposed promote a safe environment and not cause substantial injury to the value of other properties in the surrounding neighborhood? Anybody want to talk about number 2 specifically, or did we kind of cover that with number 1? Property values, is that a concern, or is it tied to everybody's concerns about number 1? safety.
My number one and number two are tied with
Okay.
safety and property values, more safety. But I think that if it were, if I were looking to put a new business in this area and I knew that this warming station was there and I had a few options, I probably would not relocate or locate a business in this same area for concerns I might have.
Like Kelly, I do have also concerns that this project could impact property values in the neighborhood.
I'm
Agreed.
sorry, I missed what Kelly said.
I just said, I had the same concerns about property value. I was thinking if I were to be locating or relocating business and I knew that this warming station was there, I might think of locating someplace further or in a different place if I had the opportunity.
And one thing is, just for the record, the source of that, that scholarly article was the Journal of Experimental Criminology, which is out of George Mason University originally. It's a peer-reviewed journal. And there were, in that same packet, there was an article from the Daily Historian. What's that? The Daily Historian, which is a local paper, I believe in Astoria, Queens. So those were the two things.
All right. Number 3, is the proposal compatible with existing adjoining development?
Does that mean their whole building or does that mean, that was the
Sorry.
question I had. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's a good reminder. Yeah, so this is, again, we're only considering the 2,000 square foot warming station. When the rest of the building, it'll come back as a separate review, I assume. But so yeah, so it's just this warming station portion of the building. Anybody concerned about the compatibility with the adjoining neighborhood? It's in an industrial district, a zoned industrial district, with a residential neighborhood behind it. But
Candidly, that's not my biggest concern.
okay,
The two previous bullet points are the concerns that I have.
okay,
I have to agree.
all right. So that one is minimal to no concern about that one. All right. Is effective landscaping and buffering provided? That's really not part of this submission, so we can probably skip number 4. Is adequate off-street parking and loading provided? The applicant noted they have way more parking than they need. Oh, Chris, sure.
I just do want to ask this to Sarah and Carmelo on the record. At the previous public hearing, one of the speakers was suggesting there's some sort of disputes about parking and encroaching on other property owners. Is just so we can clear the air on that, are there any kind of ongoing legal disputes with any neighbors about parking cars in somebody else's land?
There are not. I don't know if you have the site plan available to you, but there's the building that fronts on Clinton Street with parking behind it. I believe that individual owns a parcel then adjacent to that, and then ACBC owns another parking lot beyond that. So I'm not sure what the nature of his objection is. In his parcel, there are a number of junk vehicles and trailers, and we believe people are living there, but we don't interact with that at all. That be fair?
I think he just wasn't informed that we actually own the large lot behind the space of his junkyard.
All right. All right, number 6 is egress and ingress to parking and loading areas designed as to minimize the number of curb cuts and not unduly interfere with traffic or abutting streets. We're not really making any changes, so. Number 7, does the proposed site development minimize erosion and surface water runoff onto abutting properties? So this application didn't address any changes to the site work, so that's not a factor. Are existing public streets and utilities servicing the site adequate? I think that's really not a factor on this review. Will significant existing vegetation be preserved to the extent practicable? Same thing, no site changes are being proposed. So it's not a factor. Is there adequate lighting of the site and parking areas proposed, and are exterior lighting sources designed and located so they produce minimal glare or on adjacent properties? I don't know that we ever really talked about lighting in the parking lot. Is it adequate now?
We've done a lot of work on the parking lot. There was a lot of brush, there was a lot of trees, so most of that has been completely cleared. And we've actually had residents from Hazel Street talk with us and thank us for creating more light and more safety.
Okay, all right. So that doesn't seem like it's a factor. All right. And number 11, does the proposal conform with all applicable regulations of the zoning ordinance, except as such regulations and performance standards may be modified by the planning commission? Didn't seem like there were any zoning ordinances that we were violating. So I think,
And I'm assuming, T, Brian, you can clue us in, if there was some sort of zoning issue, they'd have to go separately before the ZBA.
Correct.
Besides planning
That's correct.
commission approval, correct?
Yes.
all right. All right, so that's the 11 items for special use permit. Brian, do you feel that's adequately,
From what your notes are, it sounds as though 7 of the 11 were deemed to be not applicable, and then there was your discussion on the remaining 4.
okay? All right.
I guess from our perspective and hearing your deliberation and your conversation, the question I would pose is, if the applicant were to come back with another location on Clinton Street, what would make it different than it being here, recognizing that it is a special permit use and not a prohibited use? That's the area that I'm struggling with. So if I'm hearing there's concern about, drug use and criminal backgrounds and things like that, what that sounds like to me is it's the activity itself that seems to be the objection, not necessarily the location of the activity in this particular building. And I guess what I'm struggling with is, since this use is a use permitted by special permit all along Clinton Street, what could be done to remove that concern? And if the answer is nothing could be done to remove that concern, then essentially you're saying that this use is not allowed in any place that it could be allowed by special permit. So there are no conditions which you could impose that would alleviate your concern. And I think that's an interesting conversation to have.
I would just point out one thing, is that not all properties on Clinton Street would abut a residential neighborhood. So this site, if you consider the parking lot to the north, abuts a residential neighborhood. A lot of the properties on Clinton Street, particularly the south side, do not. So I just want to point that out.
I'm so sorry, that's so loud. That is one of the things that I was gonna state. It more is, I don't like that after the day, in the morning they head out with these things, but I think, and I'm not saying Clinton Street, I'm just saying for it to be something that we would go forward, that I would feel comfortable going forward with, I would want it to be in a location where it didn't have as much residential activity, where there weren't kids walking to school. If there's a way to do that, that's my concern about this. It isn't a nowhere for me.
No, I get that. But when you think about this location, which again is an industrial district, it's not even in a residential district. And I think the testimony that was given at the last meeting was that the closest residence is 2.5 football fields away. And there's no outlet for pedestrians when you go in that direction in terms of public transportation. There's no schools located there. It's not a school route. Are there kids walking up to Clinton Street? I don't know. I did not hear any testimony with respect to that on the record. And I think that, you know, the testimony that is on the record is that we'll be providing a shuttle service to take residents from the location to social service agencies located in other areas. I didn't hear a lot of information about, you know, kids walking by that area.
I'm not sure which meeting, but one of the public hearings, we did have a mom who came with her 2 kids and had said that they were walkers in the neighborhood, and that was a concern, and that's something that's held up with me. You know, that's been a concern of mine. And that's, you know, I don't know if we have some information on that, if anybody knows more clearly.
I definitely remember what
Yeah.
Kelly's talking about. There was I think it was the very first public hearing meeting.
And speaking only for
One resident.
myself, if we're talking about the entire Clinton Street area in that district, I'd be happy to examine another application in another location and go through all 11 points again. And if I felt differently about that location, I would vote differently.
Chris?
Sarah Coleman, I'll give you my honest, candid feedback. For me, this is not about whether this project's going into that particular location or somewhere else on the map that's within this special zoning area. My concern is, having read the application and the project as it's developed and presented to us. Take out the street address. Right now, that application does not meet those 11 things for me and does not address my concern.
And
So-
what are those concerns?
The outstanding public safety concerns and the impact on the general character of the neighborhood phrasing. Those are concerns that I still have based on some of the things that I've seen in the record. And
So the
it's not a
40
question of whether
bed,
it's located here or there.
so anywhere.
Well, yeah, or anywhere. It's a question of, do you come back in the future with a different proposal that better addresses some of those concerns?
Mr. Chairman,
Got it.
Commissioner Judge, are you talking about like different conditions of standards of conduct for people who are accessing the facility? Or are you talking about conditions that could be imposed to mitigate your concern? Because there was a question about whether there were conditions, and that is a middle ground that is often explored by the planning commission. You're all familiar with that, where there's either approval with conditions. Sometimes
Right.
they're pretty severe conditions, but
And that seems to be actually the whole point of a special permit, right? Conditions that's the job of the reviewing board, to look at the use, which is theoretically okay, and impose conditions to make it acceptable to you.
Right.
Are
I-
there any conditions? I guess that's my question. Are there any conditions under which this would be acceptable to you?
Yes, I'm not, I don't think there's a blanket no. I guess what I'm trying to explain is, resubmitting this in 6 months, but with a different street address is not going to be, others may feel differently, but it's not a question of no here, but yes at 118 Clinton Street. That's not the answer for me.
Okay.
But I will say this, I am not an expert on delivering these types of services or running these types of warming centers. So I don't feel comfortable trying to propose to the applicant how they can better, for lack of a better word, remedy their own application. Like, I'll know when I see it, they should develop their own thing. I don't know if the burden's on me as a commissioner.
so what you're saying is that if they were to propose something like, we can modify this, or we might be able to address your concerns by imposing this rule or that rule, you'd be willing to consider it?
Yes, definitely. Yes.
And your concerns are operational, like the intake process and that security measures. Those are the things where you think the application is lacking.
Correct.
So things like airport grade, metal detectors, wanding, checking for active warrants, checking for pedophile, previous convictions for pedophiles, or what was the other one? Arson. Complete criminal background check. Those things are not sufficient. Yeah, I address them?
Go ahead, Kelly.
I get myself in a sticky situation here, but we can just see how we were talking about security not being here as we walked in. And I know it's such a trivial thing, but a long time ago, I worked for a distributor for a wine company. I was taking my son to look at colleges. I had 3 wine openers. They took them at security. I'm not going to hurt anybody with them. They didn't give them back to me. It's different. But you're giving anything back, you're holding it, and then you're giving it back in the morning. So if I were to have had, pot's not illegal, some sort of drug with me now, they're not giving it back to me when I leave here. They're not giving me back something. So I might be in an agitated state in the morning without any more services right then. You guys do a great job. But if it ends in the morning for right then and them, and they have this with them, that is my concern, that we're putting them back in the street. Isn't what you're doing to get them in there. I think you've really are doing a great job to screen. It is about when they leave that screening process to go back into the community. Now they have everything that was in their pockets. Just speak for myself.
Sure.
I mean, that's really good feedback for us to understand what, what that looks like. And maybe you could talk about the experience.
I can tell you, since we've started the Comfort Center at United Presbyterian since April 27th, being open 5 nights a week, we haven't had one person bring in drugs. We haven't had one person bring in a weapon. So, I mean, I appreciate that. We could change that policy. That could be an acceptable condition, that we will not return any contraband or anything that could be dangerous. Absolutely. I think, much of what we do now involves harm reduction and trying to keep people safe and just trying to keep them warm. But if we need to be, more rigid around potential contraband and kind of making sure that that's permanently, removed from the community, we're very willing to do that.
So if they were to amend their, let's say, parameters of their application tonight and make that a conditional approval, does that change anybody's thoughts on how they were thinking about voting? Or is there anything else they could do that would alleviate the concerns of the 4 items on the special use permit checklist? I don't want to put anybody on the spot, but and the answer can be no. That's not that is a perfectly acceptable answer. So
I think that anybody would see that type of a condition, and I'm the stupid lawyer, so I write stuff down, but the courts have been really clear about conditions being reasonable and directly related to your concerns. And I don't think anyone would argue that that is a reasonable condition, which is related to your concern. And we would not have to amend our application. You would simply impose it as a condition, and then we would be required to comply with it.
yeah,
We're telling you we accept it as a condition, but whether we did or not wouldn't matter. It would be your right to impose it.
I would feel better if the businesses in the neighborhood felt better about the whole thing. I listened last week or last month, whatever, a couple weeks ago, and there were a lot of comments made about the city kind of not doing a whole lot on Clinton Street. Clinton Street's kind of in the worst condition it's been in many, many years. So there's that frustration that exists amongst the business folks that are down there, and then they see this and they just look at it as another, I don't know what word I want to use, but I don't want to use it. I just it disturbs me that the businesses feel so neglected in general. Clinton Street, the feeling is Clinton Street has gone downhill badly. And I think that's hurting the whole, what you're trying to do. I mean, if
I wish there was something we could do about that.
no, there isn't.
There
I mean, it's like I said, this is Pollyanna stuff, but if somehow the groups could get together and come up with a way to make this work so that everybody's happy. You know, I mean,
I
that's
mean, at the
great,
end of the
but
day, taking 40 people who are otherwise outside in the cold, walking around and putting them inside for whatever period of time.
Yeah.
And theoretically removing contraband from them for when they leave. I mean, that can't be a loss for the
yeah, no,
business community.
I don't disagree with what you're saying at all. The concerns are greater for me because of how the businesses feel that they have been ignored for a long time. And I just feel that makes it harder for me to, and it may be irrelevant. I mean, I'm not using that as a reason to say yes or no. I'm just saying that does weigh, it is weighing in the back of my mind.
And to, not that I want to beat a dead horse on this area and Carmela, but I do want to just reiterate that at the last public hearing, there were numerous advocates in favor of this project, many of which self-identified as ACBC staffers.
Yeah.
And clients who, again, were vocally indifferent and or hostile to the local businesses. That's concerning. And yes, I know it's maybe easy to write that off as they're just passionate for this project. There's ways to be passionate and to be assertive for something you believe in without denigrating your would-be neighbors. And that's a concern to me.
Well,
That's a concern.
I don't disagree with you. You know, not everyone is as sophisticated as you and I are sitting here doing this month after month, understanding the process, understanding the respect that we each have for each other in terms of the process that we have to go through. Some people, it's their first experience. They're young. You know, I think it's a comment well placed, but not one that isn't easily controlled by those people who are in charge of the organization and can manage that moving forward. And I think in terms of letters of recommendation, I was happy that the letter from the sheriff's department and the sheriff himself was mentioned. But there are many letters in favor. 11 or 12, you know, and they're listed in your packet that we provided for you. You know, it's not just our people coming out saying this is a great service. Many of our people have been through the ACBC programs, and so they're quite passionate about them. And anything that can be done to sort of help other people in the future, they're going to be passionate about. But I think other than perhaps that article, which I did not myself delve deeply into, I would characterize what you have heard in the community, both for and against, other than the professionals that provided you information, is really just generalized community opposition and fear of the unknown, fear of development, fear of anything changing in the neighborhood, which is not something you all are unfamiliar with for sure, because I am not unfamiliar with it and we work together a lot. So almost everyone who spoke in opposition acknowledged the need for a facility, the need for some opportunity to bring people out of the cold, but just not there, which is typically, you know, not in my backyard. If not there, you know, it's a question to think about where is the right place to protect people from freezing overnight? Is it, you know, all in downtown Binghamton? Is it not where people have access to services, are able to walk? It's easy to say not here, but where's the right place? Probably there's, you know, there needs to be a lot of right places. And you know, Clinton Street is a mix of industrial uses in this case, you know, businesses, housing. It is an area of the city of Binghamton that isn't strictly residential, which a lot of Binghamton is, right? So is Main Street the right location? Is Oak Street the right location? I mean, that's the thing, when you think about it, recognizing that social service uses are allowed, they have to be permitted in the city somewhere. You know, why not here? Why not here in an industrial area that, you know, is properly zoned for it? Again, we're not sitting before you as the zoning board of appeals in a use variance and having to show, you know, that the benefit outweighs the detriment in terms of a very strict criteria, right? This is much more flexible process. And so I guess, again, I ask you, what conditions, we are happy to take on the condition that you've mentioned. Is there any other condition that would put you in a position to be more comfortable?
Go back to the location.
I'm sorry, location? Yeah.
So these people, and maybe you've already mentioned this, um, are they, do you expect most of these people to already be there and they're gonna walk into the warming center? Or are they being transported from other areas in the city to the warming center?
We were considering, you know, being able to go pick people up at designated locations because it's cold and we wouldn't want people walking far. So we were thinking about having pickup spots at the library, at DSS, but just to respond a little bit more to your point, Chris, now that my office is in the building, almost every morning you can see spots on Clinton Street or right off of Clinton Street where people are camping out and kind of tented. Like, it is a very good location for this service. Not all neighbors are upset that we're there. Some of the individuals kind of more in our immediate footprint and businesses are happy, and we've been able to kind of go over and do trainings and have some outreach. One of the businesses that spoke out in opposition, actually, we were supposed to meet and he wasn't able to come because he had a staffing issue. Like, I think that those things could be worked out and it would be fine. And we're going to bring a lot to that neighborhood and the building's going to be beautiful. We also have clients that are kids. So, you know, 70 of our clients right now are kids. So they're going to be upstairs or in the building at some point. So of course we want to keep things as safe as possible. And just historically, ACBC's clinic and main operations have been at 30 West Main Street in the Colonial Plaza. We've shared that space with many other businesses that included the Girl Scouts, Action for Older Persons, Wilson Dental. Right now, Elm Crest Children's Case Management Services are downstairs. We don't have metal detectors there. We don't have security guards. You know, like, we obviously have training to work with this population and to try to keep things running as calmly and smoothly as we can. So I know, you know, we can be good neighbors and responsive neighbors, and we don't want any kind of animosity. And I am sorry, my staff were really speaking from the heart. And some of the language could have been better, but I'm very proud of them for being advocates for this population, because they're like heartfelt examples of what happens when people do get resources and support.
And also, just to reminded me when you were talking about the kids that are getting services, ACBC is putting their own daycare in the building for their own kids. So again, they're not creating an environment that they themselves are not comfortable bringing their own children to.
To be fair, the children won't be there overnight either.
But the families of people that service.
So we could have kids show up. You know, since April 27th in our comfort center, we've had 9 kids come. So we kind of create a separate area, you know, kind of, you know, create a space for them, because like we have a lot of homeless children in this community.
All right, so I guess the next question would be to the applicant. Do you want us to move forward with a vote? Do you want to reconsider after hearing comments tonight? Do you want to reconsider your application modifications? Are you comfortable with what you've got and it's not going to get any better or changes that would address any of the concerns that you're worried about, or?
Well, ACBC owns the building, so in terms of location, we can't change that. We can acquire another building on Clinton Street. The building that comes to mind is the one that's right across from the Boys and Girls Club that the Mental Health Association, I believe. Is that what that what it was? See, what does that mean? Yeah, Community Resource Treatment Center was there. That's an option. Again, I'm not sure that that would be well received by them either. But okay, that's an option. There also is residential immediately adjacent to that building. In terms of conditions, I mean, we can't change the basics of the operation. It's a warming station. It's only open maybe 5 months of a year. It's only 40 people. We're not talking about bringing 4,000 homeless people to this area. We're talking 40. I'm struggling to figure out, I mean, my instinct is to say, I don't know that we have enough votes right now. So don't vote, but I don't think that asking you not to vote is going to fundamentally be able to change anything. I'm not hearing you say that there's anything we could change other than the activity itself that would put anyone in a better position, other than the condition that you've already indicated, which is, you know, confiscating anything that people shouldn't have, illegal drugs or weapons.
All right,
Nick, I'll just add that a decision has to be made within 62 days of the closing of the public hearing. So there is, you know, if you were to table, you know, for another month, let's say, it is possible that could lapse. So there is a timeline on a decision.
There's
And
no
the
default.
clock started on August 1st.
okay. So the only other thing that I've heard while we've been talking about all this is that something more along the lines of a secured facility with a fence and a in-out guards to protect. So if somebody left in the middle of the night, they couldn't just walk down Clinton Street into the neighborhood. They'd be monitored. Is there anything like that you've done anywhere, or any other precedents anybody's ever done that, I mean, it's almost more like a jail facility where you're in for the night and you're not leaving, and
No,
we're monitoring you after you leave to make sure you don't mess with something as you leave.
Again, it's not a jail.
Yep.
It's a voluntary facility. We want people to come in if they're cold and freezing. It just doesn't make sense for us to do that.
All right. I mean, to me, that seems like the only other condition of approval that would kind of alleviate some of the concerns that I've heard. I don't think that's a great idea. I'm just asking if that's an option. So, all right, so
I mean, another condition that I can think of, just, you know, thinking about our great police department and the support the sheriff has already shown, is perhaps hiring someone to be present in the morning outside the facility when people are leaving, just to sort of clear the area and make sure, you know, we are not going to be able to hire people to trail people all over the place, but to just make sure there's no congregation happening and that people are moving along on their way. That
Okay.
is something we would be willing to do also. I have to suspect that the police department would be very open to that. I don't speak for them and we have not asked them that, but I have to believe that they would be.
okay. That help anybody feel better, or do we want to talk about that anymore, or is that not? Okay,
Very positive things, but I'm not sure if it changes.
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, those are both very positive suggestions. I'm not sure if it changes my overall opinion, but it's definitely helpful.
okay. All right. Well, is everybody okay with putting it to a vote then? All right, so I'll make a motion. Oh, sorry, I should check with Brian. Brian, are you okay? Anything else you want? Okay. All right, I'll make a motion that the requirements for special use permit have been met. With the conditions that Kelly mentioned about. Actually, Kelly, could you help me remember what you were thinking about?
The commission, the conditions I mentioned were not re-allowing any weapons to stay with them when they, or drugs or paraphernalia when they leave that have been brought in by them in the morning.
Okay,
I think that was the.
is that okay if Kelly says what the condition is? Okay, all right, so based on what Kelly just said, that would be the condition of approval.
Just because Tito or Solomon is gonna have to write this. Your weapons, drugs, and general contraband or drug
Yeah,
paraphernalia.
I mean, I don't want to be the one to word this. I mean, that's not my, I was just saying these were things that would make this a, you know, a more, something that looked more appealing and that was, gave a little bit of safety concern.
Okay.
The way we would word it, if that were a condition, would probably be that any illegal items taken from clients on intake would not be returned, would be seized.
That sounds great. Yep.
Much
So that-
more eloquently put.
All right, so that would be the condition of approval. And that's my motion. All right, is there a second? Just as a point of order, it probably wouldn't hurt to second it just to force it into a vote at where you could then vote against it. Seconding it won't really, doesn't imply you're in agreement. It just,
Since I'm the one who said it, I'll second it.
okay, all right, seconded by Kelly. So all in favor? All right, and all opposed. All right, that's 1 in favor, 4 opposed. Chris,
For what's worth, for the official oral record, should we do a roll call and so that the minutes reflect who voted how? Do we do?
all right. All right, so that's. All right,
I will make a motion now.
all right, motion by Chris.
I will make a motion to deny.
I'll second.
All right, second by Manny, all in favor? All right, that's 4 in favor, all opposed. 1 opposed. All right, so. The application. Yes, for the record, the chairman is the only one against it, so. All right, so that's a denial of the application. All right, well, thank you.
We don't have a full transcript. We do have a recording and a summary of the minutes. Yeah, that'll be on YouTube. They usually put it up in a couple days. It's
All right. So that was our. So that was the only item on the agenda, although other business is always on the agenda. Anybody have any other business they want to talk about tonight? All right,
What is our schedule like for September? Because I know sometimes with Labor Day, that might bump various meetings.
September 12th.
Well,
Yep.
okay.
All right. Motion to adjourn? Made by Chris, seconded by Kelly and Manny. All in favor?
Aye.
All right, 5 in favor, 0 opposed. Thank you.